Here you have Ian Dow of LBC, and as always, he talks a load of rubbish. He goes against the Israeli lawyer that he's going to bring on, talks down to her, and then when she says that other guests were wrong and falsehoods, he says she can't say that. Of course she can. It's a discussion. That is the whole point of being on the show, to hear both sides. And Ian Dow then goes on to say, "Oh, you can't criticise me or say that I'm doing falsehoods," when he's admitted multiple times by that point that he's lied. So you have a listen and you see what you think.
And Natasha Hausdorff joins me, barrister specialising in international law, who's also the legal director of UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust. Natasha, very good evening to you. What's your conclusion as to the rectitude of the Israeli action here?
Oh, good evening, Ian. I'm surprised by some of the hyperbole over this. It's not an issue that has anything to do with freedom of speech. These MPs can say whatever they like. They can do whatever they like. They just don't have a right to enter Israel. And individuals who consistently attack Israel, spread falsehoods about the Jewish state, one only has to look at their Twitter history. They are considered, I think properly, not to be conducive to the public good in Israel.
And the tweets she's talking about, one from February 17th, 2005, one from February 2025, and January 2025.
Actually, some of the sort of baseless falsehoods about Israel that we just heard from your previous contributor, Azriel Bermont.
Hang on,
and I have to say,
he didn't utter any falsehoods. Don't insult one of your fellow guests. That's really rude.
It's fact that he was telling falsehoods. I don't care if you think it's rude, but it's a fact.
Well, calling Israel, saying that it is no longer a democracy, or saying that it is not a democracy that can deal with criticism within the country, I'm afraid is baseless. There is great debate all the time, and indeed individuals calling for boycotts against Israel within Israel itself.
So why?
They was in the streets actually protesting last weekend. So how can he say it's not a democracy because they're not allowed to do that when they're doing it? The problem is with Ian Dow is he's in the bubble and he doesn't actually watch factual evidence. The only news he gets is from LBC these days or the BBC.
Why aren't Labour MPs allowed to do that? I mean, surely if Israel, hang on a second.
Because they're from a different country. If you want to criticise someone in a different country, maybe them leaders do not want you in that country. Would you let Hamas into the country? Would you let terrorists into? Well, we let terrorists in all the time, so we're a bit buggered in Britain. But
if Israel believes in freedom of speech, then surely it shouldn't be afraid of some of the arguments that these MPs have put forward, given that people within Israel have put the same arguments forward.
It is difficult to understand where this projection of fear arises from. Israel's statutory framework and its laws since 2017, the country's law of entry, has been very clear. I think this was also referenced by Kemi Badnoch, that Israel is to refuse entry to activists who publicly call for or have committed to participate in a boycott against Israel. And Ms. Badnoch was also right. I think the examples she was referring to were Moshe Feiglin and Geert Wilders, that this is a practice that the UK has also engaged in.
You cannot equate two Labour MPs with Geert Wilders. I don't know the other gentleman that you referred to, but he was a political extremist who would have stirred up racial hatred in this country. That is not what these two MPs were. They were on a legitimate parliamentary delegation and should have been treated accordingly.
One, they weren't on a political delegation. That's another lie that he comes up with, so another falsehood. And they did stir up hate. At one point, I think she says, let me see if I can quickly find it. Oh. This is Abtisam Mohammed, which was there, and she said, let me see, hang on. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu committing, what kind of world do we live in, where the criminal is foreseeable, displacement, ethnic cleansing is so openly discussed between him and Trump. That was from a video. So she was going there to say that it was ethnic cleansing and stir hatred.
These two MPs are stirring up hatred against Israel in their Twitter feeds.
No,
and
they're not. They're arguing their case in a democracy.
May I answer? Ian, may I answer? They're not. They are spreading falsehoods about Israel and calling for a boycott, which is why they've fallen
Well, then argue against them.
This issue. But forgive me, may I also correct another aspect of what you have said? They were not on an official parliamentary delegation to Israel. They have been clear that they were on a delegation that was organised by the Council for British Understanding, an anti-Israel lobby group, and Medical Aid for Palestinians, which incidentally only stopped funding a designated organisation when UK Lawyers for Israel complained to the Charities Commission about their links to terror. So these two very questionable organisations, so far as Israel is concerned, organised a delegation, it seems, with these two members of parliament to the West Bank. There was no record of a parliamentary delegation to Israel. So the overriding issue is here when immigration officials...
And it still states there wasn't a parliamentary delegation.
Ask for information as to the purpose of your visit, and you provide information which is not correct, that in most circumstances will put you straight on the next plane home. So quite apart from the hyperbole here, which is causing a diplomatic incident, everything that you have repeated from Labour members of Parliament and even ministers calling this out, and ignoring the sheer hypocrisy, which is pretty staggering, considering that this is the sort of legislative framework that the UK also has and has not infrequently adopted against those that are not considered to be conducive to the public good.
And if they were going to Israel to stir up hatred or support Palestinian terrorists or whatever, I would have absolutely no problem with the Israeli state deciding they were not conducive to the public good. But that is not the case here. Now, you are correct.
How does he know? Because he hasn't got any evidence, he's just got their word. Once they've already tried to stir up hatred in the UK. They signed the petition of 61 MPs to stop any sales to Israel. They've also done said it's a genocide. They repeated the lie about 30,000 babies. It goes on and on.
When you say that the Foreign Office website gives advice to, and I've got the page up here on my laptop, it gives advice to, it says foreign nationals can legally be refused entry if they've publicly called for a boycott of Israel or Israeli settlements or belong to an organisation which has called for a boycott. So from that point of view, Israel can say, well, we've warned people in the past about this, the Foreign Office website states it, so therefore fair dues. But no normal democracy behaves in this way, do they?
America does, UK does, France does, some EU countries do, Australia does. That's just off the top of my head.
I mean, name another country that does.
It's the United Kingdom.
No, it doesn't.
The leader of the opposition gave you two prominent examples of politicians that were
and I've told you that in one of those cases, the example doesn't really work.
He doesn't like the example. That's what he's trying to say.
Well, I would disagree, because the nature of the conduct of these two members of parliament, and unfortunately they are not alone in the Labour Party, in targeting Israel, in singling it out for falsehoods and a public smear campaign, falls very much within the confines of not...
What you can see his eyes squinting for is he's looking for something to fire back with as a gotcha. The problem is he hasn't got one, because he's just making it up as he goes along.
Conducive to the public good in Israel, which is exactly what this statute was introduced to cater for. And it is important to understand that they represented something that was untrue to immigration officials when they claimed to be on a parliamentary delegation in Israel. That is information that can be easily checked.
It can be, and they were. The Council for Arab-British Understanding said that the women were part of a parliamentary delegation on a trip organised by them and Medical Aid for Palestinians.
So I did just address this, Ian, but perhaps it was missed. They were not on a parliamentary delegation to Israel.
Well, they were.
So now he's saying, oh, well, it wasn't Israel that they was on a parliamentary mission to, which he stated 3 times throughout this chat. It was Palestine they was going to go into if they got permission.
Well, to get to the occupied territories, you have to go through Israel. Am I not right?
Well, let's be clear that this was not an organisation, CABU, an anti-Israel lobby group, that had made any preparations, it seems, on the ground in Israel, or any attempt to arrange a parliamentary delegation in the country in which these two MPs were arriving. So on every level here, the response can have only been expected. One almost wonders whether this whole exercise has been with every expectation of the result as another PR stunt and to create a diplomatic incident. Because let's be clear, the organisers
well, again, a disgraceful allegation with no proof at all.
The evidence is there, because that's what they did as soon as they went out and when they come back. But he puts his head in the stand about everything.
Well, let's be clear that the organisers of this so-called delegation, CABU, and Medical Aid for Palestinians, have a very thorough track record of anti-Israel activity and have and plainly on this occasion, had no preparations on the ground. This was not a parliamentary delegation to Israel.
Can I ask you a question? In that I've been very supportive. I've been very supportive of Israel since October the 7th, but various things that they've done, certainly in the last 6 months, I have called them out on air. I think some of the attacks in Gaza have been totally over the top. I think Benjamin Netanyahu himself has been very culpable for a lot of this. Would that mean that if I decided I wanted to go and present a programme from Israel, that I could be refused entry because I've had the temerity to say something that the Israeli government might not like?
That is, I'm afraid, a misrepresentation of what has gone on here.
Do you know what? I've had enough of you repeatedly accusing my guest of misrepresentation, and now you've done it to me twice. You don't get a third chance.
Because you have done, and you've admitted that you've misrepresented it 3 times. And this is the problem. He acts like a child when he's getting shot down. When he's getting proven wrong time and time again, he acts like a little 5-year-old.
Ian, I have offered over the last 15 months repeatedly to come on to address the concerns that you are raising, and that offer has been refused.
No, it's not. So you've been on my programme before in the studio.
Right. Not to address the issues that you have claimed to have concerns about with respect to Israel's military conduct on the ground in Gaza. Any individual who wishes to properly understand the situation has the ability to do that and engage with experts, those like me that have been on the ground in Gaza in September and have seen these situations with my own eyes. Those repeated offers have been refused, and all I have had in coming on and answering your questions straightforwardly, as I've been invited on to, is being told that I'm in some way being rude because I disagree with your previous guest and with you. I'm very surprised.
You can disagree, but you don't accuse fellow guests of misrepresentation, and you don't accuse the host of the programme of what you have done, because if you do, Ian, don't expect to be invited back.
But Ian, the comparison that you have just drawn is not a fair comparison, and it is misrepresentative of what these members of Parliament have done.
Okay, you've done it 3 times now. Goodbye.
And she was 100% correct, and he admitted it about 4 times. See, this is how bad LBC has got. It's almost as bad as the BBC now. And in his chat and in comments, he's getting ripped apart for it, because he even admitted that he lied twice and misrepresented it. He admitted that his guest represented it, but because she says it as a woman and because as a supporter of Israel, he gets upset like a little child. And this is our mainstream media now, and they wonder why they're getting destroyed.